Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mrs. Hagen. I'm going to be a guest teacher over the next few weeks as we learn the inference strategy. A few good to knows before we get started. First thing, if you hear any banging, clanging, screaming, or crying, I apologize. It's just my 17-month-old named Emma. She's in this really intense tantrum phase right now, so eventually you'll hear these noises. I do apologize. Next thing that's good to know, technology. So there might be a few glitches here and there, but just know I'm definitely going to work through them. The first thing I'm going to work through is this echoey audio. I definitely know it's an issue. I know it's there, so I'm going to try for our next video to make sure to get that problem solved. All right, let's get started. A few tips for success within our virtual learning community. And when I say learning community, I mean us collectively as a group working together towards our common goal. And our common goal is to learn the inference strategy. So, first tips for success. Number one, use these videos and this virtual learning platform to your advantage. You can pause whatever you need to, you can rewind me, you can replay me. Whatever you need to do to make yourself successful within this new platform, do it. Next tip for success. Write down your questions. But most importantly, please share your questions because chances are, if you have that question, someone else has that question as well. Not only that, but I want to make sure any questions you have, they get answered. So, however you're communicating with your teacher, make sure you send him or her your questions and we'll make sure to get those answered for you. Next tip for success, and I know this is a lot easier said than done. If you're like me, today is the first time that I have not been in pajamas in a long time. I actually had to get dressed today. So I know it's hard to stay focused when you're learning from home, but again, own this. Pause, rewind, replay, make this video work for you. Do what you need to do to stay focused. If you need to go text your friends, cool, go text and then come back when you're ready. Number 4, give me your feedback. This is really important because if you're telling me what you're getting out of these videos and what's not working for you, I can make sure to make those modifications. So your feedback, tell me what's working well for you in these videos. What can I do differently? What can I improve? Make sure you share those things with your teachers. That way they can relay that information to me and I can make those modifications over the next few weeks as we spend our time together. All right, let's get started with the strategy. So today we're going to be working with the inference strategy. I know some of you are familiar with strategy-based instruction, but for those of you who are not, a strategy, well, what is it? If I have any athletes out there, think about what you do when you're on the field or the court or the track. You have a strategy, right? You have a plan of attack to accomplish a task. And that's exactly what a learning strategy is. It gives you a plan to accomplish a task. So our task over the next few weeks is going to be making successful inferences. Next thing we're going to be doing together today, we're going to discuss how to infer, what making an inference looks like, what it sounds like. Lastly, we're going to be using guided notes to document our learning of the inference strategy. So we're actually going to learn the mnemonic infer. And for those of you who have never worked with a mnemonic before, I'll definitely explain that in just a few minutes. We're also going to use guided notes to document the 4 types of questions that correspond with the inference strategy. So I know some of you are already saying, what are guided notes? In your Google Drive, you have guided notes that look exactly like this. So these are your first set of guided notes. Let me get a pen here. So your first set of guided notes, you'll see right here. They're in your Google Drive and they look exactly like this. So you'll notice there are several blanks on the page and you also have this open blank area right here. So we will be filling in all of these notes, but I promise they're not nearly as much. It seems like a lot, but it's not a lot to fill in at all. So guided notes really take the pressure off of you. Instead of having to write down every single thing that I say in order to take notes, you're writing down the most critical pieces of our lesson today. And I'm definitely going to give you some visual cues to guide you through your guided notes so you know when you're writing down those keywords. So if you can, pull up your Google Drive, and if you will pull up your guided notes, they should look just like this. And like I said, you'll see several blanks. Up here we have blanks. Down here we've got a big open space. This is our mnemonic, and we're going to talk more about this in just a second. But then we've got some spaces down here at the bottom. So when you're filling in your guided notes, you have two options. You can type right on top of the line, or if you're like me and you like things to look nice, neat, and pretty, you can delete that blank space and you can go ahead and type in whatever the keyword is. And again, I'm going to make sure to guide you through and show you exactly where we're going to be filling in our guided notes. So let's hop back over. If you can do a split screen on whatever device you're using, that would be really helpful. I have a really antiquated laptop, so I am unable to do a split screen. That's another thing I'm hoping to fix here in the future technology-wise. But a split screen would be really helpful. Otherwise, during the video, feel free to pause me, hop over to your guided notes, fill them in, and then come back when you're ready. So why use guided notes? Well, like I said, it reduces the workload for you. So you're typing in the most important pieces of our lesson today instead of worrying about everything. Also, it keeps you engaged. It engages you in active learning. So you're not only listening to me and hearing what I'm saying and seeing the screen, but you're also writing down our key vocabulary from today, which evidence has shown it aids in storing new information in your brain. So it helps to create that pathway for learning, not just memorization. And again, it helps you identify the most critical parts of our lesson. So that is why we're going to be using guided notes. So, like I said, we're going to have a couple of visual cues. And a cue is something that signals to your brain that something needs to be done, kind of like a fire alarm. If you hear a fire alarm, you know that means get out, there's a fire. Well, these are going to be visual cues. And your visual cues are these two things right here. You're going to see red underlined words, might be one word, might be a group of words. If you see red underlined words, that signals to you guided notes. Also, at the top of the page, if you have guided notes to fill in, you'll see green guided notes right here. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to pause me, or if you have a split screen, just look over to the left or to the right. And I'd like you to take about 15 seconds and just skim or preview your guided notes so you have an idea of what you're listening and looking for during our time today. All right, the inference strategy. So the inference strategy helps you in a number of ways, but it's going to first and foremost help you understand what is read by finding clues. So it's going to help you find those clues in order to make a successful inference. Also, the inference strategy is going to help you answer those really difficult inferential questions. And a lot of our end of grade assessments or our EOGs, they're chock full of inferential questions. They love to ask those. So this strategy is most definitely going to help you in situations like that. So let me throw this out there. What does it mean to infer? You can answer out loud or you can answer in your head. But what does it mean to infer? If you make an inference, you make a conclusion or a guess about something based on hints or facts that we have learned. So that conclusion or that guess, again, comes from hints or facts that we have learned. We gather those hints and facts from a variety of sources. So sometimes those hints and facts can come from what we see, what we experience, and of course, what we've read. I'll give you a prime example. My oldest daughter is 12. I am much older than I look on camera, I promise. My oldest daughter is 12. Well, I walked in her room the other day and I gave her the look. And she goes, "Oh no, either I did something or actually I probably forgot to do something." And she was exactly right. She had forgotten to empty the dishwasher. So she made an inference based on my body language and based on facts that she had stored in her brain from prior knowledge, prior experience. And she knew, I'm in trouble. So we make inferences all day long in daily life and, of course, when we read. Okay, before we get much further, you probably saw your two visual cues. First thing, you've got your guided notes right here, and then you have 4 red underlines. So I will show you how we type this into our notes. So when we infer, we make a conclusion or guess about something based on hints or facts that we have learned. So if we come over here to our guided notes, like I said, I like things to look nice and uniform. So I'm going to delete that space and I'm going to type in our first blank. So when we infer, we make a conclusion or guess about something based on hints or facts that we have learned. It's how you complete guided notes. Pretty simple. So again, if you need to pause me in order to go fill those in, absolutely do so, and then come back when you're ready. Okay, reading detectives. So I want you to think of a crime show. I'm not sure if CSI is still on TV. I am a crime junkie. I absolutely love investigation discovery. I love true crime stories. I also love crime podcasts. I listen to them all the time. So I love the process. I love watching crime scene investigators collect evidence, collect clues, and then use all those clues and all those bits of evidence to come to a conclusion in order to find the perpetrator. It's fascinating to me. But if you think of the process of collecting clues, crime scene investigators work very, very hard to collect all those clues. Sometimes it takes years and years to find out who actually committed a crime. So they don't just collect one clue and say, done, found a brown hair, the lady with brown hair is the murderer. No way. They collect as many clues as possible in order to come to a conclusion. Same exact thing when you're a reading detective and you're trying to gather as many clues as possible to make an inference. You have to, number one, read what the passage is, and number two, you have to collect as many clues as possible in order to make your inference. So, where or how might the inference strategy help you in real life or in school? So, I want you to think of situations where you have to make an inference. Think about it. I know we already touched on a few. So EOGs, end of grade assessments. I live in Virginia, so we call EOGs SOLs. There are standards of learning, and we have a large assessment at the end of the year, just like an end of grade test, just like an EOG. So this is definitely helpful no matter what state you live in on your end of grade assessment, because we know that the authors of those assessments love to pack those inferential questions in there. Also, SATs. SATs have a lot of inferential questions. In fact, there's a lot of open ended inferential questions. Tests and exams. So, your unit tests, maybe you have quarterly assessments. Also, the inference strategy can help you outside of just language arts or reading. You probably don't realize it, but in a lot of your other classes, you probably have to answer inferential questions as well. Science, social studies. You probably just don't realize it. And of course, the inference strategy is going to help you show what you know. You can show what you understand what you're reading and that you can successfully make those inferences. So, just to show you really quick, this is an excerpt from an EOG published, I think it was a very long time ago, maybe in 2010. But you can see we've got a short 3-paragraph passage. Now, the EOG, loves to do this. They'll give you a short passage, and then you'll have like 80 questions about that one passage. So the very first question on this passage, you can see it says, based on the selection, what can be inferred about slalom skiing? Now, one thing I want to point out right here where it says selection, I know most of you know this, but selection is just a fancy way of saying based on the passage, based on what you just read, based on the first 3 paragraphs. So when it says selection, it literally just means what you read. But you can see right out the gate, the very first question, sorry, that's a very ugly circle. The very first question is an inferential question. It's asking you about what you read. Oh, and that's an even uglier circle. I'm telling you, I like things to be nice and pretty. We're going to erase it. Okay, so what can be inferred about slalom skiing? So right away, you've got that inferential question. So the inference strategy would definitely be applicable to this question. It would definitely be helpful. Okay, so this is the first part of our guided notes on that open area that you guys have on your guided note page. I do want to go ahead and tell you today is kind of like laying the foundation for our strategy. Much like in math, you have to learn the formula before you can actually jump into the equation. Same thing with the inference strategies. There are some foundational things I need you to know before we actually start applying the strategy. So the first thing we need to go over is the mnemonic. Some of you may be familiar with a mnemonic. A mnemonic is just a device, a memory device that helps you remember the steps of a strategy. So again, remember our strategy is the inference strategy. Our mnemonic, or our tool to help us remember the steps to the inference strategy, is infer, I-N-F-E-R. So when you have a mnemonic, off of each letter is going to come a step. The first step in the inference strategy is interact with the passage and the questions. So that's going to be the first step that you write down in our guided notes under Infer. And I'll show you really quick. We'll hop back over. So, and the questions. So when you think about interacting, what does it mean to interact? Well, we're interacting right now. It's a little bit different than what we're accustomed to when it comes to learning. But when you interact with something, you work with something. So you're going to work with the passage. And when I say work with a passage, I mean you're going to read the title, skim the passage, and then you're going to read the questions. So let me show you what that looks like. So here we have a passage. It's called Cell Phones. First thing it said to do was read the title. Now, a lot of times students love to skip the title. Why is it important to read the title? Well, the title often gives us the topic or what the passage is about. So never skip the title. It actually can give you some really important information. So first thing when we interact with the passage and the questions is we read the title. Our title is Cell Phones. Next thing, skim the passage. Well, what does it mean to skim? When you skim, you definitely don't read every single word. When you skim, you're kind of evaluating the passage. So you're saying, okay, it's 3 paragraphs. I know it's not too heavy of a passage. I can read this one pretty fast. Then you're going to skim for some key words. You might also be looking for key figures. So for example, if I look at my first paragraph, I see a bunch of numbers. I see some statistics. I see some dates. I see a percentage. Then if I look in my next paragraph, I see psychological appeal, practical advantages. I see some positive things about cell phones. Then if I skim my last paragraph, cell phones also cause problems, rude, interrupt, subways could ruin peace of mind, rude cell phone users. So I know that last paragraph by skimming it is about the disadvantages or the problems associated with cell phones. So we read the title, we skim the passage, check. Last thing is to read the questions. Now you'll notice that I'm reading the questions before I fully read the passage. I skim the passage, but I have not read it yet. Why would we want to read the questions before we actually read the passage? Well, think about it. If we know what we're looking for when we're reading, number one, we can find those really obvious answers. But number two, we know the clues that we're looking for. So if you look at this first question, the first question says, what is the purpose of this passage? Well, we know that we can be looking for some things in this passage that let us know what the purpose is. So why is the author writing this passage for us? What is the purpose of writing this passage? So we know we're going to be looking for some things in there that give us signals as to why this passage was written. Remember, it was talking about advantages and disadvantages of cell phones. Number 2, how many hours a month do Americans talk on their cell phones? Well, that's an easy one. Those questions are ones that we can literally go up to the paragraph and we can underline them. However, check out question number 3. How do the advantages of cell phones compare to their disadvantages? Now, that answer is not going to be right there in the text. The author isn't going to say, the advantages of cell phones compared to the disadvantages of cell phones by XYZ or X, this is how. The author won't give us that information. We have to be that reading detective to find those clues in order to determine how cell phones compare to, as far as the advantages, compared to the disadvantages of cell phones. So, reading the questions first help hone our ability to pick out those clues. So it helps us narrow down and pick out the most important bits of information to answer those questions in order to make a successful inference. All right, so again, first step in our mnemonic is infer. The very first step is interact with the passage and the questions. That means we read the title, skim the passage, read the questions. All right, next step in our infer mnemonic. N stands for note what you know. And again, we have a red underlined and we also have our green right here. The signals guided notes. If you need to pause me to transfer this information to your guided notes, please make sure you do that. Note what you know. That means you're deciding the question type. So the type of question, and I'll go ahead and tell you there are 4 types of inferential questions, and we're going to talk about those in just a second. Then you're going to code each question. So what does that look like? So, 4 types of questions. The first type of question is called a factual question, and this is also in your guided notes. Factual questions are the easiest. Everyone loves a factual question. Factual questions, you can find the answer right there in the text. You can circle it, underline it, highlight, however you like to identify an answer. You're going to be able to find it. It's a right there question and answer. You can easily find it. Now, when you're coding your questions, that means you would write an F. So, for example, let's go back to this question. It says, number 2 is what I'm looking at here. How many, got a random line there. It says, how many hours a month? And I have another random line there. I don't think this eraser tool is my friend today. How many hours a month do Americans talk on their cell phones? So that is a factual question. So I'm literally going to write an F beside it, F being for factual. I can literally go up to that paragraph and I can find that answer. And that answer is an average of 7 hours a month talking on their cell phones. That is how long Americans spend talking on their cell phones. So that is a factual question. They're the easiest ones because the answers are right there in the text. Next type of question associated with the inference strategy. Big picture questions. We're going to talk more about those in our future lesson, but right now I just want you to focus getting your guided notes written down. So you've got factual questions in your guided notes, and we code those with an F, F being for factual. Next type of question is big picture. We code those with guess what? A B for big picture. Our third type of question, predicting questions. We code those with a P, P for predicting. And our last type of question, clarifying. And we code those with a C. So again, factual, big picture, predicting, and clarifying. If you need to pause me to make sure you have all this information in your guided notes, please make sure you pause me. Okay, so we already kind of touched on this, but just to reiterate, factual questions, they're the easy ones. We all love these because they are right there in the text. We can highlight the answers, circle them. We know we can quickly find them because they're right there. So in your guided notes, please make sure you have written down factual questions. The answers are right there in the text. If only all questions were that easy, but they're not. Big picture questions, predicting questions, and clarifying questions require you to think and seek. And what I mean by that is you're actually having to think about what you're reading and you're having to look for the clues as you read. They're not going to jump out at you. You have to actively look for them in order to make that inference. So these are the questions that are the heavy duty inferential questions. Big picture, predicting, and clarifying require you to think and look for clues in the text. You have to infer. So please make sure you have this on your guided notes. Okay, next step in our mnemonic and infer, the F step. F stands for find the clues. Find the clues. Now, what's a clue? How do you know if it's a good one? Well, you know because, number 1, you've read the title, you've skimmed the passage, and you read the clues. And you read the questions, So you know the exact clues that you should be looking for. And those clues are going to be associated with your questions. So as you read the passage, you're going to be underlining, highlighting, however you like to notate clues. So when we find the clues, I'm going to show you that in our next video, in our factual video. So right now, I just want you to make sure that you're getting this written down in your guided notes. Again, it's just like in math, we've got to know the formula before we actually jump into the equation. So just make sure you have that F step written down. Find the clues, which means you read the passage and underline clues as you read. E, the E step in infer. E stands for explore supporting details. And what this basically means is you keep finding clues. You don't just find one clue and come to your conclusion in order to make your inference. You find as many clues as possible. Just like a crime scene investigator, they gather as much evidence as possible before they come to their conclusion. So when you explore supporting details, you continue to look for additional clues that support or back up the answer to your question. So you want to make sure you've gathered as much evidence, as many clues as possible. So make sure you have this one in your guided notes. We are almost done. Very last step in Infer, the R. This is pretty obvious, but I've seen it time and time again where students work so diligently on the process that they forget to return to the question. So our R step is return to the question. So make sure you go back to the questions. Make sure you select your best answer choice. Or if it's not a multiple choice test, make sure you're thinking about the answer that you are writing. Make sure you are supplying evidence from the text in order to support your inference. All right, make sure you have this last bit in your guided notes. Okay, so I want to do some really quick review. So our strategy is called the inference strategy. The mnemonic for the inference strategy is infer. The I step in infer is interact with the questions in the passage. The N step in infer is note what you know. The F step, find the clues. E, explore supporting details. And R, return to the questions. And we have 4 question types. Our 4 types of questions are factual, big picture, predicting, and clarifying. And we're going to talk more about what each of those questions look like in our coming videos. So the next time we're together in our video, we're going to be focusing on factual questions. Thanks so much. It was great working with you guys.